Hello folks, I hope you're having a great day today. Today I want to do something a little bit outside the normal for this channel. I want to push myself a little bit, and today's video isn't technically something that my channel normally focuses on. For those of you who are regular subscribers to my channel and watch my videos, you'll know that my channel tries to unpack a lot of classics and reviews a lot of them for you in fantasy, science fiction, and horror from older times that we may have forgotten about, forgotten treasures, forgotten classics. I like to do reviews for you. I also will occasionally do the occasional sort of think piece about a writer or an author, or give you some context. For example, I did an article for you when I talked about the nature of women in the pulp era and what the two separate main archetypes were for them and how you saw those in most of the stories during the pulp era. And I gave you an example of one way that you saw it, and I also gave you counter examples. And I enjoy that. And I'm not solely focused on the pulp era, although that's my favorite era of genres to read, but I'm not solely focused on it. I'll do things in the Penny Dreadful era. I've gone back to, the 1800s, 1810s, 1820s, reading classics for you guys. I've also gone ahead and I've done things as recently as, like, a Hugo winning short story in science fiction in the 80s and stuff. So I'll go back and forth in different eras and engage many different authors, styles of writing, eras, and so forth. But what I want to do for you today is something very, very different. But it's still sort of tangentially related to this. But I was really passionate about this. I've been wanting to do this for about 6 months now, so it's been time for me to do it. So this is going to be about Dungeons and Dragons, and it's specifically going to be about a specific world in Dungeons and Dragons called Mystara. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, it's the role-playing game. Mystara is one of the earliest campaign settings in the game. In fact, it's the second oldest one after Greyhawk. It's the campaign setting, and it's kind of the default campaign setting for the known world that includes all the early Dungeons & Dragons stuff. Not advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but the Dungeons & Dragons stuff, like the initial red box that had the starters kind of sets, and you had, basic, expert, companion, and so forth. So you had this Back Me series of adventures that took you from the first level all the way up to level 36, and then your own pursuit of immortality. There were paths that you could follow and so forth, and they were all kind of set in this set of worlds with a number of places in it and campaign settings in it called Mystara. So what I want to do today is take a look at Mystara. Now, Mystara is actually my favorite world, and it's still to this day. I love setting campaigns in it. I love writing in it. I love enjoying, and I continue to collect most. I've collected and read most of the books in Mystara. There's still a few in the Gazetteer series I don't own, but it was put out for a while, and it was heavily supported because it was, again, the second oldest campaign setting in the game after Greyhawk. So it was heavily supported, starting in the 70s. You got works on it up through the early 90s. It was basically discontinued in the mid-90s. There were a few books that came out in early to mid-90s, but like the Almanac and such, but it's basically kind of a done thing, and it's never been hit again since then. So there's this gentleman out there that's kind of inspired me to do this channel for you. This gentleman's named Mr. Welch, and I'll link you to it in the comments below. I subscribe to his channel. He has a YouTube channel with a few hundred subscribers. And what he has been doing for the last few years is he has been trying to keep Mystara alive and open among the Dungeons & Dragons community that are fans of the game, people who like the world, people who want to be reminded of it, or who might be introduced to the world. So he has been doing a series of videos where he will typically have a weekly update that he calls Welcome to Mystara, that will go over a nation or a race, or something like that, or a simple little concept. He'll go over one of the adventure modules that's set in the world, something like that. He'll review it in order to try to keep this current for the newest generation of Dungeons & Dragons fans who may not be familiar with the world. And as a part of that, as a passion project, he's also put together a 5th edition rule set for Mystara, a Mystara Player's Handbook, and so forth. Now, he's released these. Now, of course, it's not actually officially sanctioned by Wizards of the Coast, so it's not for sale. You can find it for free on download, and I'll also link you to that book too. It's been heavily role-played by other people who have gone through it. The system has been edited multiple times. He says in his rulebook more than 40 times. He's gone back through and edited the rule systems, and I think his book is very good. I've read it a few times, picked it up it came out a couple of months ago. It's very well done. I don't think I could have done as good a job as he's done with that book. So, all credit to him. I think he's done a great job with that book, bringing things to life, and he's done a lot of great world building. with that book. He's brought in a lot of the detailed stuff from lists of immortals to there's 5 spheres. There's not 4 elements, but 5 spheres. And he has clerics that have focuses in those 5 spheres. He's got rules for those. He's got kits. He's got everything from the calendar to new feats, new spells, and a set of immortals, and lots of other things too. He's got all these great details that he's brought over from the world, and he's made them fit the 5th edition rule set, which is very different than a lot of the earlier rule sets. And so, but he's done it. I think he's done a great job at doing that. And I think, and again, I could not have done a better job if I'd sat down and wanted to do it. It's a great passion project, and you could pick it up, and I'd recommend it to everybody here. But this video is being written in response to that, because there's one issue I have with it, and I wanted to put it in this video form. And this is, again, a way of seeing Mystara that I think some people sometimes miss. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take a look at the Pulp era and look at the Pulp era influences in Mystara, and how you're not seeing that, I think, in some of the modern sort of recastings of the plane. So what I'm going to do for you today is take a look at that book that was put out there, and then I have for you 10 examples from Mystara in increasing influence and importance that I think just totally sell that this is a pulp plane, and that's what it is. Here's my one issue though with the book. His opening pages of the book start with nation building, and he'll go over overviews of the various nations. Now, that's not a bad place to start in any book on a plane, on an entire world. The political land map, who are the powers that be, the nations, these are all important things to know as a player to get rich into the world. I don't disagree that having a chapter on that early on is a bad play, not at all. But there's no beginning. There's no beginning section that says this is what the world of Mystara is. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what this book is supposed to do. And this is why you should love it. And I think he's missing by not having that in there. Now, maybe the assumption was, hey, the people who are going to be picking up the Mystara handbook are going to be people that are already familiar with the world, and so they're just looking for, the rules for 5th edition, and we'll move on. But I think he's missing that. And I think it needs to be in there for a few reasons. One of the reasons I think it needs to be there is because it's good for new players who might be picking up the book. If you had heard of Mystara, but you've never actually, taken the time to spend some time reviewing it, you've heard of it, but you've never really had a chance to take a look at it, and this is your first chance to do so. If you're coming back to it for a while, you want to be kind of reminded of what Mystara was, what made Mystara, a very unique and different world than the other worlds that are out there in the D&D canon, then I agree. I think that's definitely something that you would want to have. I also think it's important because that way I understand what your view of that world is too, how you see that world. Because when you have not created the world yourself, all of us just have our interpretations. I have my interpretation of the world, right? I think it's valid, but it's just my interpretation. It's just my opinion as to what the world is, and what makes the world tick. What makes Mystara. And that central question is one that you answer by writing that part. Here's what I think Mystara is, and that central thesis is missing from the work. This is what the work is. This is why you should be interested in it, and this is why I think this work is this way. Right? I think he misses the forest for the trees. And we don't get that later on, right? There's no, he doesn't have some adventure modules later on as a sample to kind of give you flavor. We're not getting this sort of other stuff. I think he misses the forest for the trees. He's got amazing trees. Again, I could not have done a better job. He's done a better job than I could ever have done if I were to have, to have done this as a passion project over a few years, put together a 5th edition player's handbook. So, all the plaudits to him. I think he did a great job with it, but he just missed what makes the world tick. What makes the world the world. He has the details, but not the overarching view and vision of it. So now I know from watching his videos that he thinks that what makes Mystara, how he sells the plane and makes it different, is that this is the one world in the Dungeons and Dragons canon, the TSR / Wizards of the Coast canon, that has a where all the different races, societies, countries are just basically straight from history from our world. There's a Scottish place and Scottish people. There are Irish places and Irish people with Irish themes and so forth. So you could be an Irish druid. You could be a Scottish Galaglis, you could be a dervish from the Middle Eastern societies and so forth, right? And there's all from Yalarum, and there's all these different places on the known world that have these different sort of real world connotations, and that's true. I think that point is one that's well taken. I don't see that as the central core of the known world. I just think it's one of the ways that's made manifest. But for me, the central core of this plane is that it's the pulp world. It is the plane of crazy, gonzo pulp things that are happening. And it's not just one or two pulp subgenres. It's basically every single pulp genre except for the Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos genre. You don't see a kind of the gothic horror or the Lovecraftian style of horror in here. And it could have been. It is in some of the other planes of existence, but you don't see it here. And I think actually that's to its benefit, because this is the plane of fun, adventures, happiness, going out there and doing stuff, making the world a better place for everyone. That's this world. It's all about fun, adventure, crazy, gonzo things that are happening that are straight from the pulps. In some cases, ripped directly from the pulps, and so forth. So you get the idea. So that's what I think makes Mystara, is that it is the pulp world. It's the world inspired by pulps. And so what I'm going to do for you, again, is show you 10 different examples, different ways that you can see this in increasing aspects of pulpishness to kind of build this point that I'm making, that I think this is the pulp world. That's its flavor. That's what makes it different. This is not a traditional heroic fantasy world. This is different, where you have, all these giant arcing good versus evil or something like that, or law versus chaos in like a more Cockean view. It's not that at all, right? It's instead very different. It's pulpish, and it comes from the pulp that's pre-Tolkienian in nature. Right, it comes from Robert E. Howard. It comes from, Abraham Merritt. It comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs. Right, it's pre-Tolkienian in nature rather than post-Tolkienian. So I think that's also important to point out too. So again, here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Kind of show you where I'm going with. So here's number 10. Number 10 are the modules Temple of Death and Master of Desert Nomads. Now these are two pairs of modules that are set there back to back. One of them follows right after the other, that definitely evoke a pulp sense of style and a pulp sensibility. And they do so in multiple ways. This kind of feels like an Abraham Merritt style of adventure. There's a lot of adventurous things happening. You have this master who has built himself up in this desert, and he has built up a cult-like following among all the desert nomads, and now for the first time these desert nomad tribes are uniting rather than fighting against each other, and that turns them into a very powerful force. So you guys have to go in and kind of help take out these folks. There are going to be a lot of gonzo, pulps, wowza kind of things that are going to happen. For example, in the first module, Master of the Desert Nomads, you're going to come across a bridge during the nighttime that will go all the way up to the moon. And you can walk up this moon bridge if you want, literally a passage to the moon. That kind of stuff is just straight out of like gonzo pulps. It feels like the moon pool from Abraham Merritt's. Again, these two modules feel very Abraham Merritt to me, and they feel like the moon pool. They feel like these, early sort of style of adventures where you got to go out there, you got to take out this big bad guy who's in this era and help out this entire region and help them out. And so again, it has that kind of a pulp feel to it from the desert climate, and desert, which is also very popular during that time. There are desert pulps, eastern pulps that this also plays into as well. This style of adventure, it also feels a little bit like, as an example, Robert E. Howard has a short story out there called The Fire of Ashburnapol. It's actually technically set in the Cthulhu mythos. It was published in Weird Tales. And it also has that kind of a feel for it too. These kind of lost treasures that are out there, these lost places that are in the deserts, in these sort of areas. And so again, I'll leave that out there to you. But I think that this is a good way of also kind of opening up what the craziness is of this world and how it is very pulp. And Temple of Death is very pulp. So the next one is that there's a spaceship that landed in this place a long time ago. Here I'm going to show you Temple of the Frog, and I'm also going to show you here City of the Gods, where you can actually see the spaceship here being used for you. Now what happened in this context is they took the Blackmore's world that Dave Arneson had created at the beginning of the game, and they basically put it in Mystara, but moved it to the back. There's the Kingdom of Blackmore, but it's back in the history, but you have this advanced high technological civilization. I don't know if you saw or not in the pictures, but there are lightsabers They're and such that they're using. You have this high-tech city of the gods with all these science fiction things that are in there too, as you can see in there. So there's a lot of this stuff that's happening. You have spaceships that landed on the Earth, that crashed into the world, and then have left their technology behind. And these just aren't, hey, this happened a long time ago. But this stuff will become an important part of the world building moving forward. You're going to have this as being a part of everything from adventure modules of a lesser nature to some of the big ones like Wrath of the Immortals, which is the last major adventure set in this thing, which uses the plot line of, hey, we got a crashed ship and we got engines for it in a heavy way. And you're actually going to see these ideas in this resonance later on. But this idea of crashed spaceships on a fantasy world and mixing your genres, this was very common during the pulp era when you didn't have the genres yet codified. For example, Weird Tales published horror, science fiction, and fantasy. Well, today, horror, science fiction, and fantasy are 3 separate genres, but back then they weren't. Back then you had just weird stuff, right? Weird Tales, speculative fiction, right? They were all kind of just published as one kind of genre, right? This is before the genreification of it during the early days. So the pulp era has, you have writers that are writing all these different stories, and are big name writers. Robert E. Howard. He has horror works, right? He has science fiction works. He's got boxing stories too. I mean, he's not just a writer of Conan and fantasy. He's the writer of a lot of other things too. This was common during the era, and so crossing the streams with science fiction in your fantasy with crashed spaceships, that is a very pulp thing to do. It's not in modern fantasy because it's not, we have our genres now and we don't like it if we find out that, the magic that comes in a particular module, like from the Frog, comes from this technology that was left over from this crashed spaceship a few hundred years ago. We're not going to like that, but again, you get that idea of where it's coming from, where the world building is going, and so forth. But anyway, so that's number 9 for you. Now, number 8 for you is the Lost City. Now, unfortunately, I actually don't have the Lost City as a module. I have it as a part of Interactive Adventure, which is a composite of many of the early basic modules in one giant thing, so I don't have that to show you. But the Lost City is basically Red Nails from Conan the Barbarian in module form. I cannot basically tell you about it other than to say that, and then kind of leave it at that. I won't though. The Lost City is an adventure module that's one of the basic ones. It's set in the world in the early eras. It's by Tom Moldvay. And what's basically happening in it is that you are crossing a desert, a sandstorm hits, so for dangerous reasons you have to seek shelter in order to get out and survive, and you go seek shelter in a lost pyramid. At first you think this pyramid's abandoned, it's a ruin, that sort of thing, but ultimately you're going to find out that there's civilizations living in there, and they're going to use your arrival to kind of change their civilizations. And you're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper into this pyramid with these older civilizations of these people. And I don't remember if I'm pronouncing this right or not, but they're called the Sidnesians. And there's this ancient older group of humans that have fallen, that are lost, and have turned really dark and sort of evil and somber. And so they're going to see you as a tool for a way to dominate the other different groups that are a part of this. And that's very, very much like Red Nails, where Conan and Valeria are trying to escape, in this case not from weather elements, they're trying to escape from a dinosaur dragonish creature that they blinded, but can still hunt them with its sense of smell. So the two of them flee into this ziggurat in the jungles that they think is abandoned. But the ziggurat in the jungles, of course, has these two older decadent species in them that are of people that are trying to, that will use their arrival of Conan and Valeria. Lost City is literally just Red Nails in Dungeons and Dragons form from Robert E. Howard and from the 30s. That's actually his final fantasy work, in his final Conan work. So Robert E. Howard, it's a novella length. He turned it into this sort of pièce de résistance. It's published posthumously after he committed suicide the month afterwards. It's an incredibly strong story. I would encourage anybody watching this video to check it out and read it if you have not done so. But that's number 8. That's the Lost City. Mystara has big giant robots, and I don't mean like I mean, you see here the picture of this big giant robot on this Earthshaker module. Do you see how much bigger it is than this castle that's right here? That is not just a fun little image or a picture. That's how big it is in real life. It is bigger than like an entire city. It's this huge, than some cities or villages. It's that big, and it's not the only example of big giant stompy robots that are running around. And as you can see, this is not a golem. This is not some sort of a construct, right? That's a robot. Right? That's not, and you'll see it. It's actually a construct. It's a machine. It's not some animated magical construct. You'll see it in the module too. It's a machine being run by gnomes. Well, but kept alive by gnomes. They found it and turned it back on. And there are various parts to it. You'll be in the heart of it. You'll be in the engine room. I mean, it's a giant ship machine run by gnomes. It's definitely not a normal sort of classic heroic fantasy, hey, we're going to run up against a big giant monster. Nope, it is bigger than that. It's bigger than castles. It's bigger than some villages. It's huge. And that's another example, I think, of how you are seeing in the Mystara, this pulp feel to it. Because I'm sure you can see how that's a big giant machine, a science fiction-ish machine like that, in the middle of your fantasy world doesn't feel fantasy to modern people. But that's just a pulp gonzo-ness. And this is not, hey, this is just the beginning of the gonzo, let me tell you, because by the time we get through with this, you're going to see so many crazy things that are in this world, and you'll be like, wow, that's just not a sort of modern world story, style of story, that you would see. But we're going to really hit the crazy button before we're done with this thing. But there you go. That's Earthshaker Adventure Module, and again, it has this, huge, and again, it's not just an iron golem or something like that. It's literally a mechanical device that's piloted by an entire town of gnomes that live and are born, live, and die inside this giant machine. So that's again another example of the pulp feel of Mystara, but that's not the only one. Giving to use Vengeance of Alphax here. At Vengeance of Alphax, there's a flying sky castle. Here you're going to be, this is a master level one, you're running up against some other things. It's a siege machine that's used against you during a war that you're going to be a part of. The master level and companion level adventure modules actually introduced rules for you to resolve conflicts and in a war setting, as well as rules for you to run your own sort of civilization, barony, and so forth. Because as you get more older, more experienced, you're likely to retire, take over. So it has rules on what it's like to run a dominion, which is, to my knowledge, the only place in Dungeons & Dragons where those rules not only occur, but are considered a key part of the storyline and character development. Right? You can only be out there for adventuring for so long, and eventually you retire, you take over some stuff instead. And now you're the one sending out adventures. Now, but instead of retiring, you can just continue to play your character. Right, so Vengeance of Alphax is part of that sort of plot line, and your place is being attacked by, your domain is being attacked by another nation that's being sort of influenced by, in this case, an immortal named Alphax, which is why it's called Vengeance of Alphax. You defeated him in M1 into the Maelstrom, so now he's sending a force against you, and you're going to have to deal with the Sky Castle as a part of it. That's this incredibly strong besieging element, because it's hard to take out a flying castle, right? Anyway. But it's a part of this sort, and again, that's very gonzo and pulpish too. I mean, but it's more than just that. You're also dealing with lots of flying things. There are flying ships. There are flying. There's entire flying fleets within the nation of Alphasia, which is a huge magic-rich thing. Alphasia is actually referred to in one of the earlier missions, which is a nation you'll actually be a part of, but also will fight you to. It's a weird story, but you can read about it more in Test of the Warlords. CM1. But anyway, be that as it may, though, there's reference to it as Lost Atlantis. So now that particular reference to it as Lost Atlantis in CM1, Test of the Warlords, introduces this whole area of the nation and your world building, taking over a barony, is not going to be one that's picked up again on a regular basis. But again, there's this idea of the Lost Atlantis in your world building that is a definite pulp. That's not one of my top 10, but the fact that there's like everything flies, and you have to deal with flying castles, flying cities, literally flying cities, flying castles, and more, flying ships, but lots of this stuff flies that would not normally fly, sort of in our normal stuff, or even in sort of a low fantasy All right, and a lot of it's technology. It's technology-based, too. And we'll see another example of that later on at my number 2 spot. But there you are at number 6. There is, and then I'll finish up my top 5. All right, and the next one we're going to look at is Castle Amber. And what I'm doing now is I'm really, I think, pushing up to the top 5. These are so obvious that I can't even not talk about them. But here we'll take a look at Castle Amber. This is also by Tom Moldvay too. Castle Amber is considered one of the best modules in D&D history. If you look up any list, almost anybody is going to include Castle Amber. It's this iconic module. It was in the top modules from, I think it was in the top 10 modules when they were made by Dragon Magazine on its 30th anniversary. Most people are going to include it. It's considered this iconic module, and it takes place in a castle that's kind of connected to this other plane of existence with this family of ambers that are decadent, they're weird, and I mean like really weird, weirder than that. They're just like gonzo weird. And their place that they're connected to with these sort of time portals and such is another plane of existence that has, that's based literally from a Clark Ashton Smith world called Avernois. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, Avernois. I don't know how to speak French very well, but it's based in a Clark Ashton Smith world that he created. And so it literally is pulp in the sense that it literally pulls in a Clark Ashton Smith world. For those of you who may not know, Clark Ashton Smith was one of the big 3 writers for Weird Tales, in addition to Robert E. Howard and his Conan, and H.P. Lovecraft and his Cthulhu. Clark Ashton Smith was a world crafter. He didn't have an iconic creature like Cthulhu and the mythos. He didn't have an iconic character like Conan or Solomon Kane or something like that, right? But what he has instead are many of these different worlds, and he is the world crafter. He's really good at creating these really intricate and interesting and different worlds. And so one of the worlds that he creates is where this module literally takes place. It literally connects Mystara with an actual proper place. And all the things that are happening in it are definitely intended to evoke that sort of pulp, weird, gonzo things. You're going to have dice rolls that are going to determine if you gain stats or not based on what you ate at a dinner. There's going to be crazy things that are happening. Everybody's going insane. They've been living for way too long. Right? They're going insane with different ways and different levels of insanity. I mean, it's just, it is probably the most gonzo, crazy, out there module ever. And again, it's also considered one of the most popular. It's just so pulp and so inspired by pulp. I actually considered moving it up in my list, but then I was like, no, the top 4 is just so much more pulp than that than I want. But again, that's a great example of how you see pulp in, I think, the world building of Mystara in Castle Amber. The next one is the Hollow World. For those of you who may not know, a hollow world is this theory that there is a world inside of ours that exists, has people in it, and you can go from one to the other. And it was popularized by Edgar Rice Burroughs at the Earth's Core in the 19-teens. He put out that book. And in the Earth's Core basically has a device that's created by a scientist, and him and a couple of friends you start to use this device, which will burrow into the earth, and it actually burrows deeper down than they had expected, and it ends up finding an underground world that's in the world near the Earth's core. It was inspired by subterranean fiction like A Journey to the Center of the Earth, but those weren't actually like Hollow Earth stories. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs' 1914 At the Earth's Core is the first one, and so. And it has, and everything that's in Edgar Rice Burroughs' is in the Hollow World. In Mystara, we also have an entire setting in the Hollow World. We have the sun that's in the sky that doesn't set. It's not actually a sun. You don't have horizons. The light that's up there looks like a sun but doesn't set. So nobody has darkness or nighttime. The days have different lengths. Again, there's no horizon. You can see above you. There's no clouds that cover things up. Right? There's none of this sort of stuff happening. It has a different way of keeping time, different ways to keep track of things. And much like Edgar Rice Burroughs' world, it has a low-tech set of civilizations. It's got dinosaurs that you're running into, tribes that you're running into, and these things are happening, at the Earth's core too. You're seeing dinosaurs that still live down in the Hollow World. and a lot more. So this setting campaign is exactly like Edgar Rice Burroughs'. It almost lifted wholesale from Edgar Rice Burroughs' pulp era. There were short stories. He's got 7 novels that are kind of set in there. He'll even send his own character Tarzan down there too, later on in, I think, the 7th novel of the series. So again, and this idea of adventuring, exploring the center of the earth, that is just so pulp. And so again, the hollow earth setting that's lifted almost wholesale from it is something I think that's incredibly resonant to this kind of pulp idea. So there's my number 4 choice. All right, now you ready for my top 3? All right, let's move on to number 3. Now, if I were to tell you that there are aspects of Mystara that come from the best, most selling, the most popular pulp era stuff during the pulp era that was out there, most popular sort of stuff among readers, then I'd probably challenge you, because you'd be asking yourself, what is the most popular stuff during that era? Based on the evidence and research I've done, it seems to be the Westerns. So are you going to see Western stuff in Mystara? Like I said, everything but the Cthulhu Mythos is in here. So yes, you're going to see it. And you're going to see it in the Red Steel Savage Baronies campaign. You're literally going to see cowboys with hats, with guns. This is literally lifted out of Westerns. Now, they gave it a fantasy spin. There is a metal there called cinnabar, which you could only find in the Savage Baronies region. It mutates you. You have to keep cinnabar on you in order to prevent it. The cinnabar also helps you with your guns, so they can't be moved out. So you get the idea. But this central idea, and if you think I'm crazy, here I've even bookmarked a couple of pictures for you. I'm not sure how well they'll show up for you, but here's one of them. Here you can kind of see. You see this halfling here that has this cowboy hat, gun. You can see this sort of hat. You see this clearly here. You see the cowboy-inspired art for you. And here's another one for you. I went ahead and bookmarked. You can kind of see this guy over here. This is more of an elf with the elven features, but you can see the guns, the hat. Again, you can totally see that this is definitely a cowboy-inspired Western world. And that is something that's just crazy. To think that you're going to have cowboys and guns riding, animals and steeds, doing sort of, traditional sort of Western pulp stuff in a fantasy world, much less a modern fantasy world that was created in the 70s, late 70s, and was one of the key worlds, for TSR. Again, this is just a perfect example of how you're seeing the pulp era evinced in Mystara, and how it really makes Mystara a different place, whether it's Hollow Worlds or Western pulps in the Savage Baronies. But it still isn't going to pale in comparison to my top 2, especially my number 2. Are you ready for how just crazy and avant-garde this next one is? Know probably exactly where I'm going to as soon as I put this up in front of you. But if you don't know where I'm going with this, get ready. Get set. Another one of the most popular pulps during the pulp era were flying pulps. This is the beginning of the pulp era with its flying. You had battles from biplanes that were happening, World War I, World War II. The people that were fighting in there were very popular. You even had flying in battles in movies. You had them in also in serial movies too, that you would go and see, and you would have like The Next Adventure with various like aerial aces that were fighting. And this sort of biplane fighting is a key part of the pulp era. And you'll find, if you do some research on it, you'll see so many flying pulps and battle pulps in the air that it's just crazy. And they'll have names like Flying Aces and stuff like that, right? It's just totally crazy. So if I were to tell you that you were going to have biplanes in Mystara, would you believe me? Probably not. That's why I'm going to show it to you. But what the world building is for this is that some gnomes centuries ago figured out how to use the technology from the spaceship that had crashed I talked about earlier. And they used it to create a flying city called Sargent. And this flying city flies about, it doesn't land ever. And it needs a defense. And so they built biplanes, and they used biplane combat to defend the area. So here's what I'm going to show you. I've got the map here for Sargent, and I'm going to show you the bottom of it, so you can see how crazy this is. Here's showing you various models of biplanes in this setup. You can see it over here. and I'm not making this up. This is from, you can see right here, these are biplanes of different models and makes, and there are 4 of them actually in the map. I'll show you the other 2 here in a moment. Here's the polecat and the fighter bomber for you. Fighter bomber, polecat fighter. And as you can see, these are not like a little fighter planes, biplanes, and so forth. They are literal, like a little bit, but more kind of a fantasy take on them. Nope. These are literally fighter planes, biplanes, bombers, and such from this era, from the pulp era. Not from later versions of it. It's from the pulp era, the earliest parts. There are basically fighter squadrons. In fact, this expansion, Sky Ballista, is actually based on the Sky Ballista is actually the name in the world for the best fighter pilot squadron that's out there. So you want to be a member of the Sky Ballistas as one of these sky gnomes that are up there in the city of Serene, fighting for your people, fighting for a better life, trying to keep your city safe from aerial threats that might threaten it. And if that isn't pulp, I don't know what is, folks. I thought about just doing it as a mic drop and making that my number 1, but at the end of the day, it's just not my number 1. My number 1 choice, I think, is just so number 1. It's so obvious, but yeah. But there you are, biplanes in Mystara. And that's how gonzo this place is. All right, but now my number 1, ladies and gentlemen, here you go. Now this is my number 1 choice for the most pulp feeling aspect of Mystara. And that is the Isle of Dread. Now, by the way, the Isle of Dread is my favorite module ever, printed by anybody. So what happens in the Isle of Dread is you have a far-flung island that you're going to find out about in the early part of the adventure, and then you can go there and explore it. And as you find this island, you're going to find out that it has a lot of these local tribes rather than advanced civilizations. It's going to have some local tribes people in a little village called Tangaroa. It's going to have a big wall that connects Tangaroa from the rest of the island so it can defend itself and its other fellow local people from the giant animals that are on this island. And the Isle of Dread has all these incredibly powerful and strong dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus rexes, and stegosauruses, triceratopses, and more. Allosauruses. Pterodactyls. There's going to be all these, old and iconic creatures that you're going to have to fight off. And you can help them, and against they have this big giant wall that protects them. Now that, first of all, feels like Skull Island from King Kong, but it also feels like a lot of other modules from this too. If you remember, this is the era of the Lost World story, and the Lost World was created, the Lost World motif of these dinosaurs that are living at the time that we are, but they're in remote parts of the world, was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In the Lost World. And in the Lost World, they find a plateau in South America near the Amazon that has a number of, that's really high up and you can't get to normally. There's a number of these sort of dinosaurs, local tribes people, and these giant apes and such that are living there on the island. Not super like King Kong and giant apes, just like bigger apes than normal. But that are a problem for the local natives that live up there too. But this idea of a primitive place in the real world as an island was something that, once again, welcome back Edgar Rice Burroughs, creator of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, because guess what? He also did that same thing too. He put it on an island out in the ocean, and the island couldn't be got to normally. You had to, because its walls, it had giant walls around it, so you had to take a sub underneath it to get to it. So that's another one that's out there too. And again, you have Edgar Rice Burroughs has now been lifted twice, literally. But this idea of this far-flung Isle of Dread with the name Isle of Dread that you find about from a map that you can take a journey to, an expedition to, that has local natives, giant fauna from the prehistoric era like dinosaurs. This is just so pulp and so pulp era. Tons of people wrote this after Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did. Lots of people wrote in this. It was a big hit. It was a big idea, and it was hugely iconic. And a.merritt will have this Lost World stuff. You'll see it in other people too, not just Burroughs and Doyle. But pretty much everybody is going to write this sort of expedition to a Lost World, bringing back these dinosaurs so people can see them. Kind of see these ancient dinosaurs heading out for these various Lost World expeditions. So you're really seeing that, I think, very strongly in the in this Lost World module, the Isle of Dread, which, by the way, is also my favorite module in Dungeons & Dragons ever. in any of the editions. The Isle of Dread remains my favorite. It's just so much fun. But again, my goal there is kind of show you how fun, how crazy that this world is. It's not a traditional high fantasy Middle Earth where you have, again, all the good guys here, all the bad guys there. I mean, you got spaceships crashing, you got giant robots that are walking around, you got lightsabers, you've got, you know, they're not called lightsabers, obviously, but you get the idea. You've got Lost Isles of Dread, you've got, you know, a hollow world, you've got biplanes that are fighting each other. I mean, there's just so many different, and you got cowboys with guns fighting each other on steeds. It has all these different pulps that are a part of it. And these are all the pulps that have these fun stories that are evocative, go explore the world, help people out. So they have a lot of these world building and fun things that happen that are key and grounded in the pulp era. And so whether you're looking at Conan the Barbarian's Red Nails, or whether you're looking at you know, and some this fantasy building, or whether you're looking at science fiction in your world, you have a number of this. And so by missing this, I think that our writer of the book, Mr. Welch, I think he missed giving this kind of concept of the world of Mystara as the pulp world. Now again, it being a pulp world is my personal take on it. I think this is the world. I think that a world with biplanes is a pulp world. I think a world with the Isle of Dread is a pulp world, right? I think most of these, a couple of them were more like kind of, you know, the Temple of Death was more like inspired by pulps, but it's not like directly pulp. But I think that many of these would be mic drops to the conversation, right? In my opinion. But this is just, again, my opinion, totally, you know, welcome to consider others and so forth. But again, I want to thank you for watching this. It's longer than my normal videos. I understand that sometimes my videos come in at 10 minutes. They're not always for my reviews. It's also not tangentially, it's only tangentially related to the core 3 genres of my channel that I usually unpack for you. I just wanted to do it as kind of a bonus for you, but there you go. There you can kind of see my argument there. Those are 10 ways that I think that this world is a pulp world. And by not having any sort of world building at the beginning, kind of an introduction to Mystara, I think you had a missed opportunity there, and I don't think we saw it in other places too. And to my mind, what makes Mystara is that it is this fun, exciting world. You can change the world by going out and adventuring. It's on you. Go do it and get her done. Explore in a crazy sort of pulp setting. And so that's kind of what my take of Mystara is. That's what makes Mystara Mystara. And by not having that at the beginning, by not explaining that for new players, people that are coming back, or to talk to fellow Mystaran fans like myself and say, here's what I see when I'm putting together this player's handbook, I think that was a missed opportunity to sell the world in large pictures. I think the details are good. I just don't think the force was there. So anyway, again, I'll link you to his videos, I'll link you to his, so you can check out his channel. I'll also link you to his player's handbook too. And again, I just want to thank you for watching this. We all have busy days, busy lives and such. So the fact that you spent your time watching this video, I really do appreciate it.